Also, Thales IT are starting to look at bringing in their on-prem infrastructure to Azure via VMware. So perfect time. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, I'm Hamid. Sorry. I'm a software developer and I recently graduated of AI of Sussex, and I'm trying to know more about MLOps and cloud computing.
I'm Nick Holland, pre-sales solutions architect. I'm working pretty much predominantly in Azure and 365 at the moment, and I've currently got actually 2 tenders for Azure VMware, so perfect timing again. Yeah.
This is really good. I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested in this, given it's like kind of fairly legacy technology. But yeah, let's just do some of the disclaimers and kind of opening stuff. So everything that we say tonight, Jack and I both work for Microsoft, but this is not views of Microsoft. We might say things that are our own opinion of things, and yeah, there's no warranty support either. So just use this as a forum to ideate and share knowledge. Everyone is welcome to our user group, regardless of age, ethnicity, color, everything else as part of our diversity charter. This is super important. If you think that any of these things are not being upheld, please let us know. And please, just spread the word in terms of, would be great to get more females in particular in our groups. It's very kind of male heavy, and I know it's part of the industry and everything else, but we're trying to increase the reach of our group as much as possible.
Yeah, we're obviously in the amazing Runway East again. It's become our sort of new permanent home since the skiff. So big shout out to Runway East. If you are looking for office space or hot desking, please do check out the team at Runway East. They're not only here in Brighton, they've got places in Bristol, London, all over the place, so do check them out. And I think next we're going to hand over to the wonderful Silicon Brighton team, where we've got some new faces, but I'm sure Charlie will introduce.
Yeah, we'll get into it, don't you worry. Thank you very much, guys. For those of you I've not had the pleasure to meet, my name's Charlie. This over here is Cameron. We're currently doing a passing of the baton at this moment as I finish working in events and community engagement on Friday. Cam's going to be picking up and taking over everything for me. Silicon Brighton, we are the host of Brighton and Hove's tech sector, and we support over 30 different meetup groups in the city, including Sussex Azure user group, whom we love very much. All of the events that we run are free to join, available to people at all levels, and they're all hybrid. So obviously everyone's here in the room, but we run a live stream so you can watch online or watch it afterwards as well. And we are supported by all of these fantastic companies here. If there's a company you know who might be interested that you can't see here, please point them in our direction. We'd really appreciate it. And we are always looking for more help getting people involved as speakers at events, helping the Meetup or the amazing Meetup organizers to run all their duties, because the stuff does not do itself, I promise you. Volunteers to help us set up and pack out down and everything. The list goes on and on and on. And basically, if you would like to take more of a further step to be involved with us, that would be absolutely amazing. And generally, the best thing to do is just have a chat with us. If there's something you'd be interested in doing, let us know and we'll make it happen. These are our values. I'll let you read through these whilst I'm going on. I have to give credit where it's cite your influences. I think this is something that we put together off the back of seeing the same sort of thing which you guys have in your slides. So it was something that we put together off the back of that. Cite your influences, people. But I'll let you read through these whilst I'm going on. But if you feel these aren't being upheld at any point, the most important thing that you can do is let us know, and we will put that right as soon as we can. We are at Silicon Brighton on socials all across everywhere on the internet. There's also this Slack channel, this QR code for the Sussex Azure user group Slack channel. If you're not on our Slack community already, I would really encourage you to get on there. It's a great place to connect with people and find and share different resources. It's a huge asset. And we are in the swing of a great run of events all the way up until Christmas now. Tomorrow night, I'm over at Eagle Labs by Preston Circus doing the Brighton Data Forum. Cam, you're going to be here doing Ladies UX event. And then next week, I believe Brighton Ruby is on Tuesday. And my memory fades there. almost. But there's loads of fantastic stuff going on. The best thing to do is go to our website and look at the events listings and see everything that's going on there, and you'll find something before long that gauges you, I promise. But yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you guys very much. Have a great night. Back to you, the boys. Thanks.
Thank you. And just to say, Charlie's been doing our AV for, I think, 3 years now. And thanks, Charlie. You've been an absolute legend, and all of our hybrid content has been really good. So thanks for supporting our group. These are some of the dates that we've obviously passed now, but just looking back on some of the events that you've missed in the past. Some of them have been kind of very identity focused. We've got John Craddock, that's one of our community members, that does some great talks. They've been quite varied, but if you've got an idea of a talk, just let us know. It doesn't have to be around this theme, could be anything. Obviously, a lot of our previous talks have been kind of around specific Azure technologies. If you want to think wider than that, project, whatever, something that you've done, want to talk about it, share it, something that went well, something that went bad, just let us know.
I suppose importantly, those of you who aren't aware, Microsoft Ignite is in November. So this is literally the week after Ignite. Ignite finishes on the 22nd. I may be talking, currently trying to see if I can get a flight to Chicago and get people to approve it, which would be cool. So I may be talking, but we'll definitely probably do an Ignite recap on the 26th. And again, it might be quite nice to do it in an open forum, like what did everybody find, what did everybody learn from Ignite? So yeah, watch out for that. We'll put it out on Meetup pretty soon. And talking of that, 2025 is already in the calendar. So we've been working hard with Cameron and Charlie and the Silicon Brighton team to get these in the dates. The first date on this slide is TBC because we're just refining that one. So it could be that day. It might be another day. We don't know. But it will be around that day. So keep it free. But the rest of them are locked in. So we'll get these also out. Another opportunity, like if you've got people to talk or you want to talk yourselves, or you're looking to go on that community journey, we know that some of you have spoken in the room before, but please do feel free to come and put a slot in. Lots of dates available. We're on WhatsApp. If you're in the WhatsApp community, fantastic, easy way to keep posted on what we're up to and what's going on in there. Also, generally some tech support chat going on in there sometimes, which is quite useful. You'll generally find out stuff that's broken in Azure before you find out from the status page in this group, because people kick off and expect me and Ryan to go like, what's going on the inside? And we're like, we don't know. So like, it's a good place to join. Definitely get connected to the community. And as Ryan said, all of the events are online and all hybrid, thanks to the amazing work that the Silicon Brighton team do. So if you did miss one of those previous sessions in 2024, you can go back and watch any of those at any time, including tonight. So yeah, that's that. And I'll hand to you for this one.
Yeah, so we're always looking for sponsors. Jack and I do this in our spare time, kind of typically fund it ourselves and everything else with a bit of help. So Servant is a partner that are sponsoring tonight's event. They are an Azure partner with a wide range of skills, basically. So Jack and I know the founder pretty well. He's worked in a lot of our customers. They've got a huge amount of credibility. And they're expanding very fast because of the good work that they're doing. So 100% focused in Azure. They've got a wide range of experience. We were speaking to Des the other day, and he worked with Azure from the very start, very close to the product team, knows a lot of people. And they've got a real sweet spot in kind of early cloud adoption, landing zones, enterprise scale, helping basically scale teams out to be cloud ready. And then on this slide kind of shows some of their key workloads and focus in where they specialize, what their technical teams do. So if you are in need of a partner for transformation and a bit of help, give the team at Servant a bit of a reach out. Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about VMware on Azure. So I get the kind of gauge that there's a lot of infrastructure people in the room. You know what VMware is. You probably used it in the past. I know a few of you that I've worked with in the past. We've definitely used it in the past. But we wanted to talk about why on Azure. So a lot of our previous talks have spoken about PaaS technologies, modernization, infrastructure code. And then we're seeing this sudden influx of our customers using VMware on Azure. And we're thinking, why is this? Why would you do this? It's more expensive than native. It's kind of like, is it a backward step? We're not sure. So we thought that we'd just put this together and what we're speaking around with our customers and why the uptake is huge. there's been a lot of announcements in the media around Broadcom's acquisition of VMware, right? And unfortunately, a lot of it's negative around their licensing changes. They're changing of locking customers in at renewal time. I don't want to get sued because this is being broadcast kind of on the internet, but there is some kind of negative press, right? And we've heard from our customers that at renewal time, their price is typically going up, and their investment in VMware is almost being questioned because it's costing them a lot of money than they used to, and it's not an easy platform to just suddenly get off. You know, there's other hypervisors, but it's not an easy migration if you've got a large data center and large on-prem workload. So this is the kind of stuff that we're hearing. So Microsoft brought in a solution called AVS, Azure VMware Solution. So AVS is a first-party solution in Azure, which means that Microsoft build it, they run it, they support it, and they include all the licensing. So you don't have to deal with VMware in any part of this journey in consuming this service. And for a lot of our customers, that's a positive. And you pay for it via your Azure bill as with everything else, and it's super easy to transact. The flexibility there is that you're paying for it on a monthly basis. So if you build a data center, you've got a massive CapEx investment in hosts, your switches, your location, your cooling power, all of that stuff that you have with building a data center. AVS is priced per ESX node. So you have to have a minimum of 3 nodes for a cluster, but you pay on a monthly basis. So it's almost like a data center in a box as a service, which for a lot of people is pretty cool, right? Like you can just provision ESX nodes on the fly, and you don't have to commit to a 3-year period of depreciating the asset. You can just scale it on demand without having to send a team to rack and stack servers. As part of the cost, it's full stack, so it includes vSAN, NSX, ESXi, and it gives the capabilities for HCX migration, which Jack will cover in a bit more detail because it's very network heavy, and I know Jack loves that stuff. So effectively, this is what it is in a box. You take your existing data center, your VMware stack, and you provision an additional site in Azure. When you purchase a ESX node, you are basically renting that hardware on a monthly basis. And it includes all of those things and all of the licensing all in that one cost. So when a lot of people, and we'll go into, I do commercials as part of my job, so I won't go too sales mode and too much into the numbers, but a common mistake which is made when people look at the cost of AVS is they compare it to the cost of hardware. So like I think the smallest host is around $4,000 a month per month, which is expensive. And a lot of people that have run their own data centers would say, actually, I could buy one host for that and keep that for 3 years for the same price as one node in Azure. But actually, what you're paying for is the entire data center. You're paying for the power, the cooling, the upgrades, the storage, the licensing, the support, all of that stuff in that cost. So if you're looking at implementing this in your own company or in your customers or anything else, when you're costing it, a lot of people are like, wow, that's really expensive. But actually, if you factor in the total ownership cost of your data center, it's not actually that bad. Typically, it's comparable when you factor in the agility and the scale. AVS is available in most Azure regions, obviously because it is very physical and they're installing dedicated hardware for this. It's not available in every region, but it is scaling out. I don't think it's available in China still. But the core regions, it's there. I was chatting to Mark about this earlier, where if you are looking to do a deployment on a large scale, check with your Microsoft account team or somebody within Microsoft that you've got enough quota, because it's typically hard to just suddenly spin up 100 nodes because you're then effectively allocating 100 servers. So just keep that in mind when you're building this stuff and architecting it. Right, so here is what is included, and there's actually 4 sizes, but one's not available yet. So in the beginning, we had AB36, 36 core nodes, 700 gigs of RAM, a load of flash on board, and then as I mentioned, the support, upgrade, and patches are all included. We've got some bigger sizes now. So there's obviously the bigger size that you go, the more expensive it is, but there's almost like that sweet spot in terms of how much workload can you fit on a node. And because you're paying a fixed price per node, it's not like native services where you've got 100 VMs of different sizes. You have to kind of cost each one. What we say is get the most value. And there's a licensing conversation that comes into this as well. So if you license like SQL, for example, on physical cores, you might want to make the infrastructure as, dense as possible, load those cores up with your SQL servers and have larger instances. Or you might have the need where you need more flash capacity, so you scale out on smaller nodes to give you more onboard storage as well. And this kind of kind of going back to what I said before, but the stuff on the left is what you'd have to manage on-prem. In the cloud, all that stuff is managed by Microsoft. So the aim is allowing your customers to not have to firefight all of this stuff, facility stuff, power networking, everything else, and focus on the running, innovating, improving, and everything else. One thing I will say is this sounds great, but I would never advocate to people just to migrate to this and leave it. It's a stepping stone. It effectively is data center in the cloud. It's not cloud. So although it lives in an Azure region, it's a way to get you closer to Azure resources and get you off the physical reliance of a data center, but it's not going to transform your workloads. And that is a good thing and a bad thing. One, flexibility, but the fact that they're going to stay on the same operating system, they're going to stay doing the same thing. They're not going to be using any like PaaS capability in what they run.
And another really key point here, and I think this is one that you get to see on this slide quite well, is people who have built and managed VMware, like most of us in this room, the first reaction that you get in large enterprises is when you introduce something like Azure is, we're not learning that, we've got no training, we've got no skills, we don't know how to do this. Well, that solves this problem because you can do your lift and shift from on-prem and get out of that hardware investment that may be retiring and not have to do that large CapEx investment again, bring it into Azure, take away all of this stuff on the left-hand side that you've now not got to worry about and you've not got to run data centers, but you've all of the skills that they previously had and they've learned in VMware, ESX, NSX, HCX, vSAN, just carries on because it is just being run, all of that stuff's being run on their behalf. They just get the same access to the control plane tools and off they go. And that's a really key asset, I think, for a lot of customers with VMware or AVS is you don't have to do any skills or transformation. Yes, you need to have a little bit of Azure knowledge and you need to get the networking stuff right, but with the right support and a partner, if you haven't got those skills internally or you don't want to read the documentation and go through it and learn that, you can just bring in a partner and get that enabled. And then once that's set up, it's sort of like, right, that's running. Like we now can just carry on doing VMware.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I've got customers that are using AVS that have zero cloud skills because once you provision it and you spin it up, you get access to vCenter, which is very familiar to people that are accessing their on-prem stuff as well. So yeah, it is a very easy transition into the cloud journey. Once you've moved into AVS, it then kind of opens up the rest of the Azure ecosystem to start plugging things into. And when we look at designing this stuff, we don't want to just lift and shift everything that they're running in their data center. Like file servers is a really good case in point. Like, why would you spin up extra ESX nodes and pay all that money just to store files when you could just move it straight into Azure Files? And the ultimate goal is running as fewer nodes as possible, getting your values out of that, but also getting the low-hanging fruit for some of the native services for Azure moving that stuff in. So Azure Files is a good one. If the customer's running like a Citrix environment or VDI environment, move that straight into Azure Virtual Desktop. Why would you not? It's a very expensive way to run virtual desktops in AVS. So what we're saying is, first step, get your quick wins and move the stuff that's hard to transform, maybe on a legacy OS out support stuff, Linux-based stuff. Keep that in AVS, but just start to consume some of these other services. And AI plugs into this as well. So you can start to use Azure AI services that can sit on the same network as your AVS cluster. So you're bringing modernization to stuff that might have been built 10 or 15 years ago. Lift and enhance, yeah. So yeah, just to summarize, this is why customers are moving VMware to AVS. Licensing concerns. So you can fix the price of AVS nodes for 5 years with reservations. It's the only Azure service, so far as I'm aware, that offers 5-year RIs. They're the same price as 3-year RIs, but if you've got a lot of nervousness around getting hit by that license renewal again, at least you've got like 5 years breathing space to say, right, we're not going to get a massive surprise, a bill shock. We've got 5 years to start modernizing our infrastructure and getting off the platform. And the goal is to just shrink it node by node, so you're left with the bare bones, and then one day you're going to be turning that off and everything's hopefully cloud native, containerized, all kind of goodness.
And it's a very, that 5-year period is a very similar thing for CFOs or accounting teams when they're charging that back. Like, they're most likely depreciate assets and hardware over 5 years. So when Ryan was mentioning earlier, you've got to factor in the total cost of ownership. Now you can say, well, here's apples for apples instead of here's a couple of bananas versus this orange. Like, you can actually bring it all into one picture and start comparing them as one. So yeah, the 5-year period is really good.
Absolutely. Data center expiry is probably one of the biggest use cases for AVS. I had a customer that came to me and said they're knocking down the building that our data center's in, and we need to be out it in 6 months. They didn't want to go to another colo and move their hardware into it. It was end of life anyway. So for them to keep going, they'd have to buy new hardware, get a new space, physically move it, or do like a big, we've all been involved in those kind of migrations. AVS allowed them to get out of their data center. I think they had something like 800 VMs and they got out in 3 months. So they just literally spun up AVS, did that live migration, turned everything off. And why they didn't move to native Azure was because, and Jack will go into a lot more detail about how this works, because it's kind of magic. They get to keep their IP addresses, they get to keep their IP ranges. I think they can keep their MAC addresses as well. So for the business that they were supporting, they had like zero perception that this had even happened, and they got completely evacuated their data center, but the virtual machines that are running on VMware were not changed in any way. You can live migrate without any downtime using vMotion, so it's exactly the same as moving between data center A or data center B in an on-prem environment. So speed and agility is one of the kind of draws for this, particularly if you need to exit a facility very quickly. Capacity is another one. So you've got a data center that's full up and you've suddenly need to do a load more stuff. You can extend into AVS, spin up some nodes on demand, move some workloads over there, run in like a hybrid state. That's another use case that people will look to. I wouldn't really advocate for that long term, because you probably need to address your capacity needs. But again, it's a way of adding capacity without having to physically do anything. Security threats. So you get, although it's, like I said, it's not cloud, it still sits in an Azure region, right? So it's protected by Microsoft's Edge. You can use all of our kind of security tooling on top of AVS as well. So it will be more secure than a typical data center. We spoke about software and hardware refresh. You kind of break that model. Microsoft do all the patching and all that stuff as well, and will move you on to newer generations of hardware as you want to. It's predictable cost, fixed price, and yeah, you can extend and scale apps out if you needed to. So yeah, just recap on that. I think we can skip that one actually. So that's basically in a nutshell what AVS is from an Azure point of view. You might be thinking, okay, I work with AWS as well and GCP, same thing available. They must do a similar thing. Typically they do similar stuff. Kind of, but not really. So AWS has got something called VMC, VMware Cloud. This is a third-party service which was built by VMware themselves in AWS regions. They're winding that down now, and I think Broadcom are going to take it over completely. So if you're looking to escape conversations with Broadcom, don't go VMC, because it's basically turning into Broadcom's cloud offering. There are some drawbacks with it. So you cannot move your Microsoft licenses into it. You'd have to use VMware's SPLA agreement. So you throw away all your Microsoft licenses and start from scratch. And it has a few other kind of limitations as well. GCP has something called Google Cloud VMware Engine, which is a third-party service. It's probably the most similar to AVS. But again, you get a lot more restrictions around license portability. I think you can only bring in like Microsoft licenses from 2019 and before, or something like that. So you kind of have to throw away your licenses and start again. So with AVS, you can, if you've got software assurance, you can just use Azure Hybrid Users Benefit and port them over, and it reduces the cost. There is something that's been announced in the last couple of weeks for AVS for VMware licensing. So if you've just signed a renewal with VMware and you've moved to their new VMware Cloud Foundation licensing, you can bring that license into AVS like you would with hybrid benefit. So it reduces the cost of the node and you port the VMware license in. So that's something new, which I think is going to help a lot of people reduce the cost even further. And yeah, this was just a kind of, I put this into the calculator earlier to see what the cheapest 3-node cluster I could build in the UK, and it comes out about 8,800 a month. So that's your minimum entry point into using AVS, really. You can't have less than 3 nodes because of reliability reasons and everything else. So just bear that in mind. And then we've got like the reservations and discount level there if you want to commit those nodes for a period of time. This is a bit salesy, this one, apologies. Spoke about reservations. You can use savings plans as well. Porting in licenses, another thing. You can save significant amount of cost on reusing particularly SQL licenses in AVS. I've just done this for a customer where they were looking at native Azure licensing via virtual core and either managed instance or virtual machines. If they flip their licenses to physical license, P-core licensing, the cost like halved because they're just licensing the physical cores on the AVS hosts. They can pack SQL servers on there, and it really made a huge saving on SQL licensing. So if you're in the hell of trying to do SQL license pricing, look at physical cores and AVS. It can be cheaper than native Azure solutions because of that licensing requirement. You also get free extended security updates for out of support Windows Server and SQL workloads. If they remain on-prem or in AWS or another cloud, you have to buy them separately. You can do it with Azure Arc now, but by just them running in AVS, because it's within Azure, you get those updates for free. So that's something I didn't cover, actually. If it's running on a VMware environment at the moment, say you've got like Server 2003 or something that's really old running a legacy app, you can still run it there. Obviously, it's still going to be out of support, but physically, you can run whatever you want there. And if it's something that's got extended support, so 2008 and above, you'll get them for free by just running in an Azure region. Do you want to cover this one?
Yeah, I'll cover this one. So who of you has done a recent insurance quote on Go Compare? Pretty much everybody in the room? Cool, you've used AVS, right? Because Hastings Direct we've spoken at one of our user groups in the past. They did a session on their landing zones, which I worked on. But actually, a lot of their migration out of their data centers was to AVS. That's how they did the initial bulk load of their migration. And still a good majority of their infrastructure runs on AVS today. And so, yeah, if any of you have got a quote from Hastings Direct, which if you use Go Compare or Compare the Market, you definitely would have. You got a response. It all runs on AVS. So there you go. You've used it without knowing. I think the one of the things that's really important here is the last point, which is it's a 1.6 times faster by just running it on the nodes in Azure, because the hardware spec and configuration that they've gained a benefit from by moving to is way better than what they ever had configured on premise on aging hardware. So yeah, if you've never looked at this, or you want a public case study to go and use with your customers, this is all available on the public website. You can go and look at this. There's a video as well where Simon, their CTO, talks about the benefits it's given to their application, like being able to get quotes 4 to 5 times faster. That's how they get ranked in these competitive quote markets. So when you go on USwitch or Compare the Market or Go Compare, whoever responds the fastest from the companies gets a higher preferential ranking in the rates, not only alone on pricing, but if they're close pricing, they'll bump you up the rankings because you responded quicker to them. So it's all about getting somebody the quote as fast as possible. So, when you start seeing stuff hidden behind, and it's loading still, but you start seeing some appear, that's because they're responding quickly. So Hastings, that's a key thing. That's how they would market.
I think they're the first people to run their app that drives all their quote engine called Guidewire. They're the first company to actually run that in a cloud. And this is a good example of those clunky, I'm not saying it's a clunky application, but there are kind of old school COTS applications that can't be transformed. They're stuck on a certain version of OS and all that stuff. You can't just natively move them to the cloud. AVS gives a lot more flexibility because they'll probably be running on-prem on VMware anyway.
Do you want me to start digging into some of this? So one of the things that you may have noticed from all of those AVS pricing slides is you get vSAN, and that's how you store your virtual machines and all of the data that goes with it. And then you might be thinking, right, so if I just need loads of storage because we've somehow got this massive application, a massive database, but I don't need the cores, I don't need more RAM, how do I get more storage? Well, you used to, and like right at the beginning of early days of AVS, it was like buy more nodes and get more vSAN capacity, right? Which would be really expensive and like quite inefficient. But now we've extended this so that you've got integration with some common services. So everybody's heard of Azure NetApp Files. We've done plenty of talks on Azure NetApp Files in the past, where you can literally, over the networking backbone of Azure, you can connect NFS data stores to your VMware cluster from ANF, so from Azure NetApp Files. So you don't no longer need to buy more nodes. You can just go, right, I'll provision a pool of Azure NetApp Files, I'll configure some volumes, and I'll attach that to my nodes inside of my AVS cluster. Amazing, right? Because now you've got this like two-way of scaling in different ways. So you don't need, if you need cores, go and add nodes. If you don't need that, go and add storage. Azure Elastic SAN, we obviously had to build our own service to provide options as well. So if any of you have played with Azure Elastic SAN, it's pretty good. iSCSI and NFS, so pretty cool service. All paths, so you don't have to manage anything. You just keep attaching storage to it and keep growing it. And also Pure as another option as well. So Pure's got some very niche use cases for some high performant workloads. Definitely, they all play a different market and well worth looking at if you're thinking about what storage option is for you. But yeah, if you were thinking, oh, do I need to keep expanding my cluster to get more storage? Not anymore. Like this has been the way for a good couple of years now. But yeah, do go and check those out. And obviously, because it's in Azure, it's spread across all our availability zones and all of the good practices that we do in terms of the way that we build and construct our Azure regions and our data centers. So you can, for those of you who don't know, everything within a region, so within availability zones, or sorry, across availability zones within a region, is guaranteed to be less than 2 milliseconds. So that is enough to support synchronous commits and synchronous data transfers. So you can run live active applications in these across these availability zones within a region. And you can deploy your AVS in something called stretch cluster, where you can have nodes across different availability zones, all part of the same cluster. So
yeah. And actually you can, typically when you're running larger data centers, you'd have like a DR region, for example. You might run active or active passive between those regions. What a lot of people are doing is consolidating both of those into just stretch clusters around availability zones, because they meet the same SLA and requirement as their two data centers that they have at the moment. This simplifies things because you only need one set of firewalls. It's almost like you can combine all of that stuff, where in two physical locations you need mirror infrastructure, mirror switching, mirror everything. In availability zones, you can combine them, have a single, whether it's Azure firewall or NVAs or whatever. It just simplifies the architectures considerably, whilst giving you probably about the same, RTO, RPO, SLA, all that stuff that you would need from your existing environment.
Yeah, even improved RPO and RTO at that time, right? Because it's all synchronous, so you don't even need to replicate it across regions. Some important stuff, if you're just looking at that storage slide, I'm a bit like, so which one do I use when? This is quite a good slide. We'll make sure that we give access to these slides at some point afterwards as well. So effectively, ANF is a good fit for most use cases. You'll find it's the most applicable to most because it's got flexibility in its storage and capacities and different tiers. But, as you can see here, if you don't require some storage snapshotting or region replication and stuff like that, and you don't need more than 64 terabytes, Elastic SAN might be a good choice. But if you do need to go up and you need more performance, you're starting to get in towards Pure and Azure NetApp Files. So good work tree. These are all in public documentation as well. So if you need to make decisions, they're all out there as well.
Actually, native storage is not on there either. So you could use Blob, you could use Azure Files if you needed something for a simpler workload too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about AVS and what it is, and everybody should have a good overview now. The biggest problem I think I see with every customer trying to do AVS is they don't get the networking right. Networking is the hardest part of AVS, but only to set it up, right? Like, it's not complicated once you've got it running. It's fine, but you need to configure it in the right way, and you need to approach the design of your AVS networking in a very particular way. a guy in my team, and actually a number of my colleagues that work in the team that I work in. The guy specifically is Federico, based out in Italy. He has written very comprehensive guidance in our cloud adoption framework for AVS, which literally tells you decision trees at each point. I'll show you some of them in a minute, but what you should do when and why you should make what decision about what topology you choose. But I'll start to dig into why it gets a little bit complicated. But first, I'll do a bit of Azure background and just make sure we're all on the same page. So we all know what a subscription is, right? It's the container that you get billed from, right? It's literally, that's where you put resources. Inside a subscription, you would typically have a virtual network or many virtual networks. And these are your private network within Azure, right? That is your private address space. To connect back to on-premises, you would typically have an express route, which is dedicated fiber between you and us to connect you to your Azure virtual network. And then we've got these devices that sit in between that called our Microsoft Enterprise Edge, or MSEEs, as you'll hear them referred to. And these are effectively the routers that your cable comes in from on-prem and plugs into, and we take it and plug it into your VNet, is a really good logical way of thinking about that. And when we plug it in at the other end to your VNet, you need something called a virtual network gateway, which will terminate your express route, or you can have VPNs as well, so if you want to do that over the internet without an express route. So that's a little bit of ground setting, and a little bit more on the express route side is where we start getting into some of the technicalities. AVS abuses a feature called global reach on express route. And what global reach does is really simple. If we look at the diagram on the left here without global reach, you'll see that we've got two express route connections, one from Silicon Valley and one from London, each connecting to respective regions. And they've done something called bow tie connections here, right? Because it looks like a bow tie, like all the connections, that's how it got a name. But what happens here is the two on-premise locations, so San Francisco and London, the bits in orange at the bottom here, aren't able to talk to each other in this configuration. Even though they're physically connected, there is a physical data path between them. They're not allowed to talk to each other because our express route does not let you use it as a transit service by default. However, if you enable the global reach tier or the global reach SKU on your express route, which is on express route premium, you do need to be on the express route premium tier, but you can upgrade to that. We allow you to effectively do that green box on the right, which you can start using Microsoft as your WAN provider, which is pretty crazy. So if you don't like the telcos you're working with, or maybe you have complicated telco, you're working cross boundaries where you might not have a relationship with a telco in America, but you do in the UK, you can suddenly build your own WAN over Microsoft and be like, it doesn't matter, we'll just pick any random provider and we'll use Microsoft's backbone to get all of our data to and from. Now, you may be thinking he's talking about on-premise stuff here, and we're talking about AVS. Why is that important? And the reason that's important is because AVS, you will see on the left here, which this diagram doesn't display very well, but if you imagine on the left here, you've got this dedicated Microsoft Enterprise Edge router. AVS is just like another on-premise location in terms of a networking concept. It doesn't live inside your virtual network. It's not deployed inside a virtual network from a typical software-defined networking stack, like a virtual machine is, or a private endpoint, or anything like that. You connect to it via express route technology and using global reach. So effectively, what you do is you use global reach to connect both to your Azure workloads in the Azure region, but also to on-premise as well. So express route is really important with AVS. Sizing it correctly, making sure you've got enough capacity and bandwidth. All of that stuff is really important. Also, routing and BGP becomes super important. So you definitely need your network nerds in the room when you're starting to have these conversations, because you need to start talking about how the route's going to be reflected and passed around here and what goes where, and let's not get into asymmetric routing and all of those good things. But a good question in this scenario is, well, do I have to also pay for an express route now? Like, no is the answer. So the express route from the dedicated MSEE is free. It's included in the AVS price. So you can connect that to your MSEE and your express route gateway in your virtual network, which will then allow on-premise to get to it. And that connection and the bandwidth is all included in the AVS node price per month, so you don't have to pay for it.
And that's kind of your gateway into native Azure services, right? So if you want to use NetApp files or SQL powers or something like that, that's how it connects to general Azure, right?
Exactly. That's its way into the rest of Azure. So the express route is super important. Also, HCX. So if you want to do live migration, like keep the same IP address space, you must use express route. You can't do it with VPNs. And you have to get this configuration correct so that you can enable this packet flow from on-premise to the cloud as if it was one shared network. As I said, you connect this to your Azure virtual network, and that's how you enable the connections between it. And as it says here, you're not billed for any costs of that express route as part of it as well. And if we build this up in terms of what it actually looks like, so we've got our Azure setup. We're running today in Azure. We're all happy. We've got a hub and spoke. We're all good. We suddenly decide we want AVS. Great. We've configured AVS, and we've now got this dedicated MSEE up here. And we enable that global reach connection, connect our express routes together, and happy days. Everybody can talk to each other. All good. That easy. Now, you may be thinking, like Jack said, it's really complicated, but that doesn't seem actually that complicated. Well, the devil is in the detail, and it's all of these different traffic flows that I've got listed out here. So you've got traffic between on-premise and your native Azure, traffic between on-premise and AVS, traffic between AVS and native Azure, and actually you've got to add into this traffic from external, like internet, into AVS, and traffic from AVS to the internet. They're all typical control points that your security teams will want to inspect or want to meddle with and play with and see what people are up to. And depending on what they want to see and what they don't want to see will dictate even further your architecture, because you're going to need to put firewalls in paths and all of these stuff, and it gets very, very fun. So this is the recommended approach to design your network with AVS. Each one of these phases is a good 3 or 4 documents that you should probably read. And you need to start it with this in order. So you need to understand the AVS basics, right? We've just gone through that. You should get those now. You should then first design how you're going to get to it from on-premise. Start there. Like, how am I going to connect on-prem to get into AVS? Once you've got there, design how it's going to get back into your Azure VNets, the stuff you've already got running in Azure. How you're going to get to Azure Net Files, how you're going to get to private endpoints, all of that stuff. Then worry about how you're going to get inbound internet connectivity into your cluster, your AVS cluster. And then outbound probably has solved itself by that stage, but like it might be different. It can be in some places. And each of these phases, so if we took the first step, has all of these things that you should consider, right? And decision tree. So do you want to use Express Route Global Reach? Yes, cool, implement it, right? Job done, very simple. Customers who don't want to use Express Route Global Reach, bit of a complicated journey for you, and you've got a few decisions to make. Highly recommend you just use Express Route Global Reach, much easier. But you know, there may be reasons you can't. It might not be available in the region you are. There are some regions where Express Route Global Reach is blocked by the government because it's not a telco that they can monitor. So you can imagine some of the places that that's not allowed, but decreasing, and we're working on it. And then once you've got through that stage, you're then thinking about phase 2, right? So did you choose to use Express Route Transit? Yes, right, we chose to use Global Reach. Great. Go and read the section about connectivity with Azure VNets with not, and implement some user-defined routes to make sure that traffic works. If not, you go on this slightly different path. All of these steps have got different documentation that takes you through this step by step by step, right? It's super important. It looks a lot, but if you follow the flows and the decision trees, you can't really go wrong. Like, we've done so many deployments with customers, like thousands, where we keep refining this, that this is now sort of locked in for the last 18 months, and it hasn't really changed that much. You've now thought about this, you're now thinking about internet access. Like, are you going to be using your own? Are you going to put your own MVAs in, or are you going to, put it through Azure firewalls, all of this stuff? Are you going to use NSXT to just handle it itself because it can? All of these things you can think about. And then you're thinking about, how do we get internet access in? And then you're probably done, right? But all of this stuff is in the Cloud Adoption Framework for AVS. So if you go into the Cloud Adoption Framework and you look at AVS, you'll find all of this stuff. Do you want to talk about BCDR?
So spoke about availability zones. You could go active with another Azure region if you wanted to, if you needed something that's like really high availability, replicating what you would do on-prem. But there are certain third-party providers that give you some cool bolt-ons for disaster recovery in AVS. So I'll call it Jetstream first. Basically, this allows you to replicate VMDKs into an Azure blob store in another region. And then if you invoke DR, you then have to power on or provision an AVS cluster, pull in those VMDKs and power it up. So it's really low cost because it costs nothing to store those VMDKs. The flip side is it might take a little while to get that stuff booted up if you needed to. Also, you're going to need to provision all the networking, test it in the DR site, and then deprovision the nodes. If there's a big outage, everyone's going to be wanting AVS nodes, so keep that in mind. But it's a really cheap bolt-on solution to give you passive DR, and it's almost a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest, because if you're only paying for the storage and it's just a bit of belts and braces stuff, it will just keep them up to date. I think Zerto does a similar thing, but it's a bit more intelligent with managing multiple clusters across different regions. And then you can use ASR if you really wanted to. I think SRM comes with AVS as well. I think you get I think it was called an Enterprise Plus license. They've rebranded it into something else now, but basically you get nearly all the features of all of the higher tiers of VMware licensing. Same goes for backup. A lot of the typical vendors that you would use for on-prem backup work and are certified with AVS because the technology is the same. Typically, I would encourage customers to just use what they're using at the moment, so long as it's relatively modern, not like super wacky old school backup solution. So,
but really importantly, networking is really important at this stage, because if your backup solution is somehow still on-prem, you got to think about the latency and the bandwidth and the throughput you're going to get from that. So you might want to use a more modern solution where you're maybe putting that into the cloud or putting Commvault storage or using blob storage to back that off to. Like, you really need to think about that from a networking perspective, because you don't want to overload that network, because it's the same network that all your customers are going to be coming over to get to their applications that are in AVS. So really need to carefully consider your networking at that stage as well. But another key selling point, as we were talking about earlier, people don't have to learn new skills. Carry on using what you've been using. It's just running somewhere else. We haven't got to, make sure that the aircon still works in a room. Like, that's an easy way of thinking about it. We've talked about the different solutions there. And as we said, like, you've got multiple choices here. Like, basically whatever you want to do, whether you want to go highly available in a single region, you want to use stretch clusters, you can do that. That can alter your DR scenario. If you want to do it across Azure and you want to have clusters in different regions, you can do that. You've got SRM, you've got Zerto, you've got Jetstream, all these things make it possible. But effectively, whatever architecture you want to go for, whatever compliance requirements you need to meet, are all possible with AVS.
you could also use AVS as a passive DR region as well, right? Say you've got a small environment or even a big environment, use one of the replication technologies, have it sitting there passive, and then you could scale up nodes if you had to invoke DR. So keep a 3-node cluster, which is relatively cheap. You can at least power on your core mission critical workloads, and then scale if you needed to, if you had a really big outage. So again, it's leveraging that kind of data center on demand, data center in a box type methodology. You can skin it however you want, really.
And I think here's a good comparison of what to use when. Again, all of this documentation is available in our cloud adoption framework and our Azure VMware Service landing zone accelerator. So yeah, do go and check all this documentation out, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to implement it and get it right from the start. And lots of people inside of Microsoft are willing to help out. So speak to your local Microsoft account team or partner teams, and they'll be very willing to help you get this right and get you on the right road. I just want to go back a few slides and talk about how the magic works, because I realize I haven't got a slide for it. So I think I had it back here. This one. The magic of keeping your own IP address space, right? This is probably the biggest selling point of AVS migrations versus going to Azure native, is the fact that your on-premise network, let's face it, we've got some software developers in the room. Like, sometimes we hard code things that we shouldn't hard code, and we put IP addresses in, or we put, hard coded DNS names in host files and all sorts of random stuff that we do, which means changing the IP address is not only something we don't want to do, but we also don't know what will break if we do it, right? And that's generally the risk that a lot of the legacy enterprise applications we live in come with. So by doing an AVS migration from VMware on-premise, you can use the wonderful technology of HCX, which is included in the price as well. If you follow some setup steps, you need to configure, you have to use NSX in AVS. You don't have a choice. But on-premise, certainly when I was doing VMware on-prem, NSX was sort of like this, oh, that's shiny and that's expensive. We won't pay for that one. We'll just do standard VMware switching and we'll get on with it and we'll be fine. But actually more modern installations of VMware on-premise typically do use NSX because it brings a lot of benefits into the software-defined networking stack. But if you don't, you just need to install an OVA into your on-premise agent. Again, all downloadable, all configurable. And then you effectively use that as a broker between on-premise and the cloud. Now, what happens is you need to configure some VMware distributed switches on your on-premise cluster that come from the NSX appliances that you've installed in your on-prem cluster. And then what they'll do is they'll sync up with NSX that's running in AVS. And now you can stretch certain networks between on-premise and AVS. So you can say this on-premise port group or network segment that we've got in our VMware cluster on-prem, which goes through the distributed switch, through NSX, appliances on-prem, and effectively just appears the other end. So what happens from a technical perspective is there's like a VPN is a very simple way of thinking about it that's built through all of the express route underlaying foundations we've built. And this layer 2 packet, so we're talking physical layer 2, gets encapsulated in a layer 3 packet, sent across NSX to the other NSX appliance in AVS, unencapsulated, and it appears as if it's in the same network and everything goes, oh, that's great. So you could effectively do a broadcast packet across layer 3 networks. It's how things like VXLAN, if any of you have heard that term in before, VXLAN works very similar, but it's just proprietary software and code that VMware have written and packaged it up into HCX to make it really, really simple, and it integrates into that VMware networking stack of NSX. So all included in the price, even if you haven't got it today on premise, which a lot of legacy customers might not have. They then go, yeah, but we can't do that because we haven't got NSX. You can add it, and it's pretty easy to add, right? And it gives you so much benefit because now I can move a VM from here to there, and it didn't change its IP address. The software devs are happy because they haven't got to worry about what might break or what they got to fix. Also, from a licensing perspective, some of these lovely off-the-shelf applications used to license based on MAC address. Hasn't changed because it's just been migrated. So it still lives, still carries on, and off you go, right? So you get a lot of benefits from it. Again, it's not like run active down here and your other thing over here. I probably wouldn't say that's your best design solution if you're relying on HCX, but it's fantastic to do that migration phase because no IP addresses are changing. So yeah, just wanted to call that part out there. I think we're going to move on to a little bit of AI and then we're wrapping up into questions.
Can't remember what we put in this one. Yeah, so I kind of hinted at this to begin with, but obviously everything's about AI now. And it allows being in that Azure. We kind of covered a lot of this actually. Being close to an Azure VNet, you can build new native Azure services. Very little latency between your VMware VNets and your native Azure VNets using the technology that Jack's just mentioned. But it just allows path to modernization quicker than if you had an on-premise data center trying to bolster this stuff on, because you're then dealing with a lot more latency between them. It's not going to work as well. Same goes with any service really, but particularly calling out the OpenAI service. This is an example of document processing with AVS as a kind of use case. So here's some of like the AI technologies, functions, Power BI, all that kind of stuff that you could use to build a solution like that. The example here was basically what would live in the AVS cluster would be a legacy bit of software, but you're using some of these PaaS services on top to modernize it and enhance it at the same time. Then we've got another one for translation. There are hundreds of these, like different use cases, but with AVS kind of at the core of them. What's the next one? Yeah, contact center and analytics. So using call center agents, some of the new like ChatGPT, fast response and prompts for call center applications. You know, for Hastings Direct is a really good one, right? If their chatbot will plug into their insurance platform running on AVS and using a similar design and architecture to this, I'd expect. And virtual assistants very, very similar, but obviously you can see a lot of native PaaS-like services in Azure that are helping support those workloads running in AVS. And that's it. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting, and hopefully it's changed your view of what VMware and Azure is. Any questions? Hope you can see a use case for it.
We're seeing a lot of it in enterprise space right now. The Broadcom thing is definitely driving a lot of the conversations. But I think what Ryan made a really good point earlier is don't pitch it as the replacement. Pitch it as the stepping stone to help us accelerate that migration. It's like, look, let's put it in 1 year. Lots of people doing 1 year reservations, right? Like they're using it as the driver to go, we'll do it, but we don't want to be here forever because it's expensive. We're just going to use this as like accelerating our transformation, put it in, get all our workloads out, get away from that data center that's, you know, going away or whatever, and then modernize as quickly as we can. If you need to buy another reservation and you realize 6 months in, we're going to need to extend that, go do it. Like, it's fine. Like you got that flexibility. You maybe lose out on some of the financial benefits, like a small percentage of the discount might disappear, but that's all available to you, right? That's the flexibility of it. So definitely in some of you in those enterprise scenarios, that's the way to pitch this is, you know, enable it as an accelerator, not as a replacement.
Yeah, and I've seen it time and time again where customers want to do a cloud modernization journey, but they're dealing with a data center exit at the same time, and they wrap it all into the same project. So they're dealing with the whole, let's get rid of the hardware, let's, you know, move domain controllers, let's do all of that stuff whilst we're trying to modernize to PaaS services. And it's like, it's almost a failed project before it's began, because you've got app devs trying to do all of this kind of cool modernization stuff whilst getting rid of the legacy stuff at the same time. There's too many moving parts. This actually just lets you get the data center exit done without transforming anything, and then you can focus on redeveloping stuff and everything else without having to worry about the walls caving in all the time. So,
Any questions?
if not, let's finish the pizza and open another beer.
Would you say that would be? Oh, you got
That
that
one.
microphone. Would you say that would be latency? Because my understanding is it's physical tin in the data centers. Dealing with some financial clients, they're very latency specific and sensitive in their data.
And that steered them away from Azure before, because they're fundamentally dealing with public cloud is too slow, it's too latent, it's too high latency. So would you say this is kind of a good sort of bridge for it almost?
So I'm definitely working with some banking customers that are using AVS. Hastings Direct would class themselves as a financial customer as well because they're insurance. But yeah, I'm definitely dealing with some well-known high street banks that are using AVS. The key is don't run workloads in both places at the same time. Like, yeah, fine. For a temporary period, you might need to do it as you're doing a migration, but actually try and get all of the app in one place. Like, don't put your web tier in Azure or in AVS and then leave. Like, it's just standard things apply, right? It's standard infrastructure fundamentals. Like, don't run your front end 2 million miles away from where your back end is, right? Like, it's going to be bad. But you can use HCX to help you with that migration, because the biggest problem a lot of customers going into, you know, from a financial aspect was you'd have to go to Azure native. So like they use latency as a blocker, but actually the blocker was, we got to change our IP and we can't have any downtime for this application. With AVS, using SRM or using vMotion and HCX, your downtime could be like this, like it could be a blip, right? It could be a tiny blip.
2 ping drops typically to migrate, which is why it's imperceivable to a lot of people.
So I think, yeah, absolutely. Like latency is still a concern, like, but if you choose the right peering locations and you put your clusters where you're close to, like you're not going to have it any worse than what you've seen today. Like, you know, UK South, like our latency to UK South, if you've got an express route customer from London, you're talking less than 10 milliseconds most of the time. And most customers in financial industries will be sovereign, like they won't want to go outside of a single country where they're hosting that stuff. So your latency is always going to be quite low. Yeah, in that migration time, you're going to have some challenges, but definitely get the migration complete. Use HCX as the enabler to do the migration, and then your job done, and you haven't changed your IP. Yeah.
I think in my previous project, actually, RSA, Royal Sun Alliance, the insurance client, they were exiting their data center and moving into AVS. So one of the challenge we faced is, so migrating virtual machines is very easy, but How about physical servers? Because they have high-end physical servers like 32 CPU and 128 GB RAM kind of things. Or, so the problem is, when we use 36p, if you want to migrate to 36p, you know, uh, so the cores are, exhausting, but the RAM, they're left with RAM. So it becomes very expensive solution if they want to migrate the physical servers.
Yeah.
So they decided to stay as it is, but I think we haven't explored moving to IaaS solution like Azure VMs, but
You can mix and match, definitely. I think a lot of people are forced with physical servers to P2V them. If you can, if you can't and they have to remain physical, yeah, I mean, you're kind of stuck with it. I mean, you can use dedicated host or if you can just go to Azure native with a very large VM, like say it's like an SAP instance or something like that. We've got dedicated Azure VM tiers for that stuff, but it can coexist with other things in AVS as well. So
Yeah, I think that's the important part, right? You can mix and match. It doesn't have to be we're in AVS or we're not, or we're in Azure native or we're not. It's important to realize that, back to Nick's latency question, you can live in both Azure IaaS or Azure native and AVS, and that latency between in the same region going through those express route edges, you're talking like 2-3 milliseconds, right? So it's enough to be synchronous. So you could go, do you know what? We'll put all of we'll have a really small cluster and heavily load it and get the best efficiency out of that AVS cluster. But we have got some large SAP HANA instances that we're going to stick on M256s or M128s in dedicated hardware in Azure native. They're going to be able to talk to each other. Okay, they're not in the same network. You're going to have to change the IP address of one part of the application, but it's a known blast radius, and you can take the benefits of all the other things like license portability. Don't have to worry about the hardware anymore. You can increase it, use Azure backup, ASR, all of those other great things that come with it. So it's important to just not say one or the other, mix and match.
another example is domain controllers, right? If you want to, for disaster recovery reasons, like don't lift and shift domain controllers, build them in Azure native. You could build one in AVS, one in Azure native, and at least you're kind of like spreading your eggs for risk as well. But yeah, like things like that, you don't need to run them in AVS. Mix and match and use the most cost effective, but also like don't overspend. I wouldn't put things in AVS if you don't have to. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Other thing, our customer chose to use Jetstream for their DR purposes.
Yeah.
As you rightly said, so we can replicate the storage without having the servers, but I think they accept the risk that in case of disaster we may not have the servers because everybody will compete for the servers.
Yeah.
But they expected that Microsoft, the chance of going a region down is once in a century. Or
it's a similar risk with native VMs using site recovery, right? So same thing could happen. You try and power on VMs. Another thing could be resource constrained. So there's those kind of things you need to think about. That's what will drive people to active for mission critical workloads. But again, you could mix and match. You could have your key app running active between two regions, but passively migrate some of the lower tier ones as well. So you could Jetstream some of the stuff that wouldn't need to come online straight away in a big outage, and then go active for your mission critical.
I actually met my first customer the other day that bought capacity reservations in a second region so they didn't run into this problem when DR happened. And I was doing a DR review of their best practices, and I was like, wow, a customer's actually done it, right? Because they were, for their mission critical stuff, not low applicant, low tiers, but gold and platinum as they classified it, was no, we have capacity reservations in the other region ready to invoke. Yes, we're paying more, but we don't have that problem of fighting with everybody else when capacity goes to a problem. So customers do it. It was quite refreshing to see that a customer's gone, that's the platform, that's what we've invested in, that's how we guarantee our capacity. It was good to see. And they even bought bigger capacity reservations for smaller tiered applications, so they could choose, they could scale all of their apps down a little bit and squeeze them into a capacity reservation. They would be less performant, but at least they'd be able to run them, right? So they really thought about it. It was quite interesting to see. So it definitely happens. Challenge the business on If it truly is mission critical, you need to pay for it. Like nothing changes that, whether it's in Azure or whether it's on premise, right? Trying to just go, well, that's Microsoft's problem because they should have unlimited capacity. That's naive. I think if I'm being honest, right? You know, with my non-Microsoft hat on, that's just naive of your poor BCDR planning. You're planning for failure effectively. Any more questions? No?
Cool. Okay, well, let's wrap it up there. And thanks again, everyone, for coming. Hopefully see you at the next one. We might be having a Christmas thing, by the way. I don't know if there's going to be Christmas drinks. Don't know. Watch this space. Yeah, I'm not about to sing Mariah Carey or anything else.
I'll take that microphone away from him before he starts talking about Christmas anymore. But yeah, thank you very much for coming. Stay tuned to Meetup and we'll get the next event published shortly. Thank you very much.